Before the sun fully touched the rooftops of Madison Grove, Georgia, the streets already carried a quiet kind of rhythm. A rustle of sycamore leaves in the breeze, the scent of old magnolia trees, and the gentle tap, tap, tap of a white cane against weathered bricks. That cane belonged to Eleanor Watkins, a 74-year-old black woman who had been blind for over 2 decades. To anyone watching, Eleanor moved with a grace that didn't need eyes. She didn't rush, didn't stumble, didn't lean on anyone but herself. Dressed in a rose-colored shawl and wool skirt, she walked every morning like the path belonged to her. And in some ways, it did. Eleanor's house sat on Maple Street, a modest one-story brick home with a porch swing that creaked with age. Every morning at 6 a.m., without fail, she locked her door, slid her fingers down the rail of the steps, and tapped her way down the cracked sidewalk toward the community park. To the neighborhood, she was Miss Watkins, the lady who knew everyone's birthday, who handed out peppermints wrapped in scripture, and who never missed church on Sunday even if it rained. But what most people didn't know was that Eleanor was also the mother of Darius Watkins, a U.S. federal prosecutor stationed in Washington, D.C., a man known for fighting systemic injustice, especially in cases that involved law enforcement overreach. But Eleanor didn't talk about that. In Madison Grove, pride wasn't broadcasted. It was folded into the way you carried yourself. Quiet, strong, unshakable. This morning was like any other. Or so it seemed. Eleanor's steps were steady as she made her way past Patterson's Bakery, where the scent of cinnamon rolls danced in the air, and across the bridge that split the park in two. The cane in her hand wasn't just a tool, it was memory. It had belonged to her late husband, Walter, a Vietnam veteran, and her compass in life until his last breath. Now it guided her alone. What Eleanor couldn't know, what no one could have predicted, was that something was waiting for her at the edge of the park. A uniform, a badge, and a voice that wasn't there to help, but to humiliate. That morning, the wind seemed colder, the silence more fragile, and the next few moments would turn a routine walk into the beginning of something much larger than Eleanor Watkins could have imagined. A confrontation that would ignite a movement and awaken a town that had been quiet for too long. Eleanor was nearly halfway through the park when she heard the footsteps. They weren't soft like joggers or brisk like walkers. These steps were deliberate, boots striking gravel with the kind of force that was meant to be noticed. She paused just past the tall elm tree, her cane planted ahead, sensing not just the change in terrain, but in energy. "Ma'am," a man's voice called. Clipped, flat, lacking any warmth. Eleanor turned her head slightly toward the sound. She couldn't see the uniform, the badge, or the eyes watching her with suspicion. But she could feel it, the weight of scrutiny. The assumption. "I'm fine," she said, gently but firmly. "Just out for my morning walk." "You out here alone?" he asked. This time, it wasn't curiosity. It was a challenge. "I always am," she replied, voice steady. 20 years, same route. I know it better than most folks who can see." There was a pause, a sound like a smirk caught in the back of the throat. "Well," he said slowly, "maybe that's part of the problem." Eleanor didn't answer. Not out of fear, but because she knew these kinds of conversations. They started civil, then unraveled fast. Men like this, they didn't want dialogue. They wanted dominance. "You should really be more careful," the officer added, taking a step closer. "The world's not as nice as it used to be." "No," Eleanor agreed quietly. "It's not." The silence between them was thick, not the calm kind, but the kind that vibrated with warning. And then came the shift. "Let me see that for a second," he said. Before she could respond, a hand grabbed her cane. Eleanor gasped, instinctively tightening her grip, but it was too late. The officer, badge number 362, though she couldn't see it, yanked the cane from her hands with a force that jolted her back a step. "What are you doing?" she cried, her voice breaking with disbelief. He didn't answer. Instead, with one violent snap, the cane broke in two. Wood cracked like bone, a sound that echoed louder than any shout. Eleanor stood frozen. That cane had been with her for decades. It had guided her through widowhood, through surgeries, through rain and sun and heartbreak. It wasn't just a stick. It was her freedom. The broken halves hit the pavement with a dull clatter. And then, as if discarding trash, the officer dropped the pieces at her feet. "Next time, ma'am, don't get smart," he muttered. "Some folks might not be as patient as me." He turned and walked away, not rushed, not remorseful. Eleanor didn't move. Not yet. Around her, there were people. She could hear them. The rustling of jackets, the sudden quiet, the tension hanging in the air like static. But no one said a word. No one helped. She knelt slowly, one trembling hand reaching for what remained. One half of the cane still held the warmth of her touch. The other was cold, splintered, and exposed like an open wound. Her heart didn't race out of fear. It raced from the sheer humiliation of being dehumanized in public while the world stood by. But she didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't fall. She stood, blind, shaken, but standing. Step by step, Eleanor made her way home. No cane, no guide, just memory, muscle, and will. Every footfall was a declaration. The world had tried to silence her. But she would not be quiet. Not now. Not ever. 3 days passed. The town of Kingston Hollow moved as if nothing had happened. Cafes served lattes. Buses ran on time. Children played beneath maple trees whose branches had quietly witnessed cruelty. But Eleanor hadn't stepped outside since that morning. The broken cane, a gift from her late husband, lay gently wrapped in a linen napkin on her kitchen table, half relic, half scar. And yet, her silence wasn't defeat. It was preparation. Across the country in Washington, D.C., her son, Marcus Langston, sat in his office at the Department of Justice, reviewing case files. A decorated federal prosecutor, Marcus had made a name for himself taking down corrupt officials and defending civil rights violations. But that morning, his phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. "You don't know me, sir, but I know your mother. You need to see this." Attached was a shaky video taken by a teenager named Leo, who worked the coffee cart near the park. The footage captured the moment Officer Rourke yanked the cane from Eleanor's hands and snapped it in two, the sound of it cracking louder than the traffic in the background. But even more haunting than the act itself was what followed: silence. Dozens of passers-by witnessed it. None intervened. None offered help. A quiet indictment of an entire town's complicity. Marcus didn't finish the video. He was already booking a flight home. By the time he landed in Kingston Hollow, the town square was buzzing with whispers. Rumors of what had happened. Of who Eleanor's son really was. Some dismissed it as small-town exaggeration. Others weren't so sure. At exactly 6 a.m., Marcus stepped out of a black SUV and walked up the path to his mother's front door. He didn't knock. He still had the key. "Mom," he called softly. Eleanor was sitting by the window in her usual chair, her posture strong but her hands trembling. She didn't turn to face him. "I knew you'd come," she said quietly. Marcus knelt beside her and gently took her hand. "Why didn't you call me?" "Because you're doing good work in Washington. I didn't want to bring this burden to your doorstep." "You are my doorstep," he replied. "You're the reason I do this work." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe it's time you do it here." Later that day, they met with Officer Rourke's department, but the meeting went nowhere. The police chief dismissed the incident as a misunderstanding, claiming Officer Rourke believed Eleanor was disoriented and possibly a danger to herself. The broken cane? Unfortunate, but unintentional. Marcus said nothing, but he wasn't done. That evening, under the golden glow of the town's community center lights, Marcus held a press conference. He stood behind a wooden podium, the broken cane in a clear evidence bag beside him. "My name is Marcus Langston," he began. "And while some of you may know me as a federal prosecutor, I'm here today as a son." He paused. The crowd leaned in. "My mother, Eleanor Langston, a blind, 77-year-old woman, was assaulted in broad daylight by a uniformed officer, not with fists, but with something more insidious: humiliation. He didn't strike her body. He struck her dignity. And no badge gives anyone that right." Gasps rippled through the room. "This isn't about just one cane," he continued. "This is about every elder who's been silenced. Every black woman dismissed. Every person who's been told their pain isn't real." Marcus held up the shattered cane. "This is not just broken wood. It is evidence. It is testimony. It is the truth that too many want to ignore. The crowd erupted, not with anger, but with resolve. Among them were Eleanor's neighbors, friends, the boy who filmed the video, even strangers who had seen it online and driven in from other towns. The quiet shame that had gripped Kingston Hollow for years had cracked, and now something brighter, fiercer, had begun to rise. Back at home, Eleanor watched the news coverage on her son's phone, the images blurry to her, but the meaning clear. She reached for his hand. "You did good," she whispered. "We're not finished," he replied. "No," she said. "We're just getting started." The next morning, Kingston Hollow woke up different. The bakery sold out of its morning batch by 8 a.m., not because people were craving pastries, but because they were gathering, whispering. The video of Officer Rourke snapping Eleanor's cane had spread far beyond town limits. Local news stations picked it up first, then state outlets. And by noon, Eleanor Langston's name was trending on social media beside hashtags like #JusticeForEleanor and #BrokenCaneTruth. The silence that had once choked the town had been shattered, but so had its illusions. Calls flooded the Kingston Police Department. The chief held a press conference, attempting damage control. "We take all complaints seriously. Officer Rourke has been placed on administrative leave pending review." It wasn't enough. At the next city council meeting, community members lined up, one after another, to speak. An elderly Latina woman took the microphone first. "Last year, that same officer told me to go back where I came from when I asked for help after my car broke down. I was too scared to report it." She looked down. "I'm not scared anymore." A teenage boy followed her. "He stopped me walking home from basketball practice. Searched my backpack like I was a thief. I never forgot the way he looked at me, like I didn't belong here." One by one, the stories spilled out. They weren't isolated. They were a pattern. And Marcus sat in the back of the chamber, taking notes, calm, focused. He wasn't just a son anymore. He was building a case. Eleanor, meanwhile, stayed home. She didn't crave attention. She wasn't seeking fame. But every morning, letters arrived. Some were from neighbors. "We're sorry we didn't speak up." Some came from strangers. "Your strength reminds me of my grandmother." One letter, handwritten on pink stationery, read, "Because of you, I filed a complaint against the officer who harassed my father. Thank you for being brave first." It was overwhelming, healing, and heartbreaking. But the most surprising response came from within the system itself. Detective Simone Clark, an internal affairs investigator, knocked on Eleanor's door 2 days later. She was tall, black, and wore her badge without apology. "I'm not here to make promises," she said. "I'm here to listen and to act. You're not the first, but I intend to make sure you're the last." She sat with Eleanor and Marcus for 2 hours, asked detailed questions, took statements, collected the cane fragments. "It won't be easy," she warned, "but the video changes everything." The town began to shift. Not all at once. Not cleanly. Some resisted. Some called it a witch hunt. But many, more than ever before, wanted to look inward, wanted better. School teachers brought up the story in civics lessons. The local church hosted a Justice and Grace night, inviting voices that had long been ignored. Even the mayor, previously quiet, issued a statement supporting a full investigation. And then came the formal announcement. The state attorney general's office had opened a civil rights investigation into the Kingston Police Department. Marcus stood beside Eleanor when the press asked how they felt. Eleanor didn't smile, but her voice was steady. "This was never just about me. It's about every person who's been told they don't matter, and finding the courage to say, 'Yes, I do.'" 1 month later, the winds in Kingston Hollow had changed. On a clear Sunday morning, the townspeople gathered in the square not for protest, not out of outrage, but for reflection. A new bench had been placed beneath the old elm tree. Engraved on the backrest in polished brass were the words, "In honor of Eleanor Langston, for every step taken in dignity, and for every silence that turned into voice." Eleanor, dressed in a navy shawl and holding a new cane crafted from African rosewood, slowly approached the bench. Marcus was by her side, his hand steady on her arm. She stopped in front of the plaque, brushed her fingers over the letters, and whispered, "He would have been proud." She meant her late husband. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of every word. The crowd stood silent as she sat down, centered and calm, a quiet symbol of resistance made real. Then Marcus stepped forward to speak. My mother didn't ask for this attention, he said. She didn't want to become a headline. But when dignity is broken in front of the world, we have two choices: turn away or face it. She faced it. He held up the old cane, now split and preserved in a clear glass case. This is not just a cane. It's evidence. It's a reminder that power without accountability becomes violence. That silence protects abusers. And that courage, real courage, often comes without applause. He paused, looking around. But it's also proof of something deeper. That healing starts when truth is spoken. That justice can begin with a single voice. And that sometimes, the strongest people are the ones who walk with the most pain and keep walking anyway. There were no cheers. Just a soft murmur, a hum of humanity reawakening. As the event ended and people began to leave, many approached Eleanor, not with pity, but with respect. Young children waved. Old veterans tipped their hats. One woman placed a small bouquet of violets on the bench, whispering, "Thank you for being brave." Later that evening, Eleanor sat quietly in her kitchen, the new cane leaning beside her. The old one, broken, bruised, but honored, rested on the mantel. And as the last light of the day filtered through the window, she smiled softly. Because she knew this was more than a reckoning. It was a beginning.